Somebody say, I have decided. I have decided to follow Jesus. That's the best decision. That's the best decision. As you know, we are in part 3 of a series called I Have Decided, and talks about all the different aspects of the decisions that we face. Decisions that we make today will determine where we end up tomorrow. It's just a fact. And the decisions that we make end up making us. I read recently that the average adult will make about 35,000 decisions in a 24-hour period. That was hard for me to realize until I got in my car and I went out of here and I thought about how many just driving decisions I had to make between here and the entrance sign. You know, whether you're going to lay on the horn and honk at that person that's going real slow and talking in the parking lot and holding you up, or you're just going to be patient and not. It's a decision that you have to make, isn't it? There are decisions in life, and many of them are just routine decisions that we don't think much about when we're making them, but there are also very strategic and important and weighty decisions, and those are the kind that we need to have a little bit better bearing about how we're deciding those things. I gave you the opportunity a couple weeks ago, and I'll extend you the chance today again to make a mid-year resolution. We don't normally make mid-year resolutions. We think of New Year resolutions, but we're about halfway through the year, and so you can make a mid-year resolution today to do just one thing differently than you've been doing and see in December what God would do with that little change of a decision that you're making. Today I want to talk, part 3, about our relationships, because you and I are the sum total of the relationships of our life. Whether they're good relationships, they're bad relationships, they're relationships that are speaking life to us, or they're relationships that are sucking the life out of us, we are a sum total of the relationships that we have. And here's the important thing to realize. You and I were designed to be in relationships. God said it was not good that man would be alone, but he made a helper for him. He made someone suitable for him. The Ecclesiastes writer in chapter 4 says it like this. Through observation, he said, there was a man all alone. He had neither son nor brother. There was no end to his toil, yet his eyes were not content with his wealth. What is this speaking to us? It is speaking the fact that relationships are vital to contentment in life. Relationships are valuable to your happiness in this life. I'll never forget the first time that I went to the Billy Graham Training Center at the Cove in the beautiful mountains of Asheville, North Carolina, all by myself. First time I had gone with a friend, the second time all by myself, and I just couldn't wait to get out to the back deck. If you've never been there, you need to stop on I-40. If you're driving through, you can stop in for free and just see it. It's an amazing place to watch out and see 1,100 acres undisturbed, God's beauty as you stand out on that back terrace. And I stood there and I pondered and I looked, but it wasn't long before I realized that this experience, this moment, would be just a little bit better if only I had someone there to experience it with. And not just anyone, but the first person that came to my mind was, if only Holly could see this right now. There was just a desire to experience that beautiful scenery with the one that my heart loves. And you have the same experience in your life. There is just something that is special about sharing that time and that moment with someone. You were built and designed to be in relationships. And I know that not all of us are so privileged today to be able to walk in relationship with the one that our heart loves, or maybe through separation of death, it's caused us to not feel that anymore. But God has given us a promise that He would never leave us and He would never forsake us. He will go with us always. We can take comfort in knowing that He is guiding our every decision. We make a lot of excuses as to why that we're not in relationship with people. We make relationship decisions based upon a lot of different factors. one of the factors that I think we make relational decisions is really naivete. We're just naive to the fact that we need other people around us. We think we can go it alone. We sometimes chart out on a course and say, hey, I'm going to go this thing on my own. I don't have to do what everybody else is doing. I can buck the trend and I can do it myself. I can be a lone ranger. And that's just simply naive. I remember reading a story about the great boxing legend Muhammad Ali when he was at the prime of his boxing career. He had boarded a plane, and the stewardess apparently didn't know who he was because as they were going through all the routine about putting on the seatbelt and buckling and everything, he wouldn't put his seatbelt on. She went up to him and she said, sir, you're going to have to put your seatbelt on. And he said, ma'am, Superman don't need a seatbelt. And she leaned down real close to him and she said, sir, Superman don't need a plane. Put on your seatbelt. We're so naive that we can just go it alone. We can do this thing. We don't need relationships. We don't need people disturbing us and bothering us and holding us up and taking our time. We can just go it by ourselves. That is naive. Or we say things like, well, yeah, Pastor Joe, you're just so likable. Everybody likes you. You just have the temperament for relationships. You have the gift of gab. You can just talk to people and you can get along. Sure, you have a lot of friends. Sure, you have a lot of relationships. I don't have that temperament. Can I tell you something? If you want a friend, be a friend. If you need someone to smile at you, why don't you initiate a smile first? There's something contagious about smiling. That if you smile at somebody, it's really hard for them to frown at you too long. If you don't believe me, just irritate them and smile and keep smiling. Don't say a word. Just smile and smile and smile. And finally, they're going to smile back and think either this person's face is stuck that way, they're crazy, or they need something in return. I'm just going to smile to get them out of my way. You may not have the temperament as your neighbor. You may not have the same kind of setup that they have or think that you have what it takes to be in fulfilling and lasting relationships, but God has designed you to be in relationships. And here's the wonderful thing, is that opposites many times attract. Opposites do attract, don't they? Many times. And so you don't necessarily need to find someone just exactly like you. Find someone who's the opposite of you and let them love you for you. Amen. And let them love you for how you operate and what you do. And so there are a lot of reasons we come up with as to not get into a relationship. Another big one is just fear. We just simply have a fear that someone's not going to like us or they're not going to accept us or they don't want to get into the mess of our lives. Our lives are so messy. I like what C.S. Lewis said in this quote. He said, friendship is born at the point when one person says to another, what? You too? I thought I was the only one. Now leave that up there a second. The great writer C.S. Lewis, he boils it down and brings it to the point of saying, friendship is a commonality of people who have walked the same road. They have experienced similar things. Yet each person is feeling as though they are all alone. They are the only ones, and no one has ever experienced what they have experienced. And when we get past that fear that we're not going to be accepted, that no one's going to understand us, that I'm just a little bit quirky and nobody's going to really want to be with me, that just things about me are a little bit different, when we get past that, we will realize that what we have in common is a lot greater than what separates us. We have so much more in common, and that is just simply a fear that causes us to stay back. One of the biggest setbacks to forming lasting relationships is past bad experiences. People will tell me, I am not going to put my heart out there again. I am not going to be loving again. I am not going to be trusting again because I have been hurt. And people say this all the time about church. I'm not going back to church because I have been hurt at church. I went through a church split. I went through a church infidelity case. I went through something in church, someone that I had high esteem for, someone that I highly respected. They fell from grace. I have been hurt and I'm not going back. It's the same with relationships. Someone has broken my heart. They have betrayed my trust, and I am not going to be vulnerable again to be in that same condition. Can I tell you this? The past hurts that you've experienced in a relationship have a lot more to do than just the two of you. because the enemy was looking long down the road to try and cause you a break and a separation and a disappointment in relationship, because he knew that if he could stop you in your track at this level of life, then you would never get to the place of attaining the fulfillment and the joy of what God has promised for you. It's not just about the initial thing. People say, I've been hurt in church, I'm never going back. Well, I've never heard somebody say, I've been hurt at McDonald's, they gave me a sweet tea, I asked for a regular tea, I'm never going back. No, we just circle back through. If you're in a hurry, you save your receipt, you go back, and they'll give you a free one the next time. We get so irrational about the past hurts of our heart when it comes to relationships that we don't apply that same rationale to many other things in our life. Of course, people let you down. They're people, they're human, they're flawed. At the very best, they're inadequate. That's what relationships are all about, in the redeeming love of let me see those around me. As we sang just a minute ago, let me see those around me. Expand my vision for love. Other times we're just too busy. We say, I don't have time to invest into a relationship. I don't have time to pour out into another person. All that it requires, I'm just too busy. And I'm going to tell you then, you're too busy. Because we find time to do what we want to do. We make priorities in life, and we finally find a way to fulfill what it is that our heart longs for. Your happiness is going to depend on you and a who. That's not Dr. Seuss. You and someone else. You were designed that way. You were made that way. And so you need to be in pursuit and keep your eyes open that if you need a good relationship, you need to be a good friend first. You need to have that kind of a heart that you reach out to God. So how does this really come into play when it comes to the scriptures? Look at 1 Peter chapter 4. I'm going to read verse 7 in just a second, but it talks here a little bit about those that have come to Christ, their lives have been changed. Peter says, for you spent enough time in your past life, he's talking about the old things you used to do in verse 3, in doing the will of other people. You walked in lewdness and lust and drunkenness and revelries and drinking parties, abominable idolatries, he says. In regards to these, they think you're strange that you no longer want to run with them in the same flood of dissipation, and they speak evil of you. You know, sometimes when you make a change in your life and you want to go a different direction, people will talk bad of you. They'll say, yeah, look at little Christian boy over here. He's going to be good for a while. Well, you just go ahead and do that church thing. We'll be over here partying when you're done. Come on back. We'll accept you back. And they'll make fun of you. And then 2 weeks go by, and 3 weeks go by, and 5 months go by, and they realize you're not coming back. Why? Because I have decided to follow Jesus. The cross before me, the world behind me, there's no turning back. There's nothing to go back to. I've decided. I'm going to fix my gaze on the prize, and I'm going to follow Jesus. And it says that they're going to make fun of you about these kind of things. And in verse 7, he says this, but the end of all things is at hand. Therefore, be serious and watchful in your prayers. And above all things, have fervent love for one another, for love will cover a multitude of sins. Be hospitable to one another without grumbling. As each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of God's manifold grace. You know what he said right here was, after all of this ridicule, after all of these things have taken place, what you need to realize is that the end of all things is near. You need to be sober, you need to be serious, and you need to listen up on this point. Now, when Peter says the end of all things is near, we immediately go to our own individual eschatological, theological outlook of end times. What all of that entails. And I'll tell you that there are at least 5 major schools of thought when it comes to this phrase on what he would say end times. Now, he said it's at hand. Here's one thing that you'll find in all 5 of these schools of thought is that every generation of Christendom, from Peter and the apostles on through our day, have believed that the time of all things ending was in their generation. It was right there in their time. So regardless of where you find yourself on the spectrum of end-time studies or eschatological things, I think that we should take to heart the words of the great C.S. Lewis, where he said that in essentials, we have to be unified. In the death, the burial, the resurrection, the virgin birth, the sinless life of Christ, his resurrection, his kingdom, we have to be unified. That's unity. In non-essentials, like the third toe beast and the fourth head and the 10 horns and all these things, in non-essentials, how about liberty? He said, give liberty, give grace. But in all things, Lewis said, charity or love. So in essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty. But in all things, love. Regardless of where you stand in that first part of that text of the end times, here is one thing I can say without a doubt. You are living in your end times. Even if your lifespan happens to be the blessed old age of 100 years old, you are living in your end times. So where do you put yourself on the time frame of having the opportunity left and the ability in your body to create meaningful and lasting relationships that impact the kingdom of God? Are you 30? Then you've got 70 years. Are you 60? You've got 40 years. Are you 80? You've got about 20 years. Are you 90? Your end times are upon you. Be serious, be sober, be thinking about this. He said, above all things, what did he say? Love. Love one another, because love will cover a multitude of sins. It allows you to overlook that offense and that insult when you really want to harbor it on the inside of your heart. And what we need to take from this is we need to learn to nurture the important relationships in our life while they're available to nurture them. We need to tell those that we love you, I love you. We need to show those that we love that I love you. And we need to repeat that formula over and over again. I love you, show love, do it again. I love you, show love, do it again. I love you, show that love, and then do it again. Now, we take ourselves off the hook in relationships to say, well, they know how I feel about them. Of course they know I love them. My beautiful bride sits on the front row this morning. In October, we will have been married 18 years. Yeah, thank you. That's a good place to clap. Now, I could easily stand up here and say, Holly knows that I love her. I told her so 18 years ago on our wedding day. But how many know that's not going to fly? She wants to hear it every single day. And I've learned not just once, not just twice. She wants to hear it lots of times every single day. And I have to quote this scripture, honey. I didn't tell you I love you enough today, but that love covers a multitude of sins. Is there anyone in your life that you're not nurturing the value of that relationship? But today you realize that I am making a decision. I am going to tell them how I feel, that I love them. I'm not talking about making a decision to give somebody a piece of your mind. That's another sermon. We'll get there another time, okay? I'm talking about making the decision today to tell those people that are important to you that they matter to you. And consider this. Do you have someone in your life that they can be completely unashamed, candid with you about you? Do you have someone in your life that loves you enough to tell you when you're wrong? To tell you when you're in error? To tell you when you're off course? I spoke to a man when I was 18 years old, face to face, that I had so admired his ministry. I'd watched him on television. I'd so admired his ministry. Regardless of what you think about him today, it doesn't matter. I was just enamored to be in his presence. Had an opportunity to meet privately behind scenes with Benny Hinn. And I was thinking, man, what could I ask this guy? I mean, there is someone here that has done such great things and traveled the globe and seen miracle after miracle. I'm a young guy. What can I ask him? And my mentor stood to the side and he said, what would you tell a young man getting ready to go into the ministry, getting ready to prepare for the ministry? What would you tell him after 30 years of being in ministry at that time yourself? And he looked down. I'll never forget the expression on his face. He thought for a second. He looked up and he held up his hand like this. I thought Benny Hinn was about to lay hands on me. I'm getting like this, ready to fall out. That wasn't what he was going to do. He held up his hand and he said, 5. If you have 5 true friends your entire life, you are going to be a very blessed man. 5 true friends. What he's saying is 5 people who can speak the truth in love, and you don't buck up and get all mad and say, no, I'm not accepting that. But you take the wounds of a friend as faithful love. And you realize their motivation behind what they're saying is not to destroy you, but it's to empower you. It's to better you. And if you don't have anyone in your life that you trust to be completely candid with you and that speaks the truth in love, sometimes it tells you when you're in error, sometimes it tells you when you're wrong, then you need to get some accountability in your life because you are missing out on one of the most fulfilling relationships that you could have, and you are not going to be able to attain the goals that God has for your life without a truth teller in your life. Who is it that has tried to be candid with you, and because of your own pride, you didn't want to hear it, but now you're hearing this saying, maybe I missed something. Maybe I need to circle back, and I need to restore that broken relationship. Romans 12:17 says it like this: do not repay evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, it is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord. You notice here that he says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on who? We need to get those words bigger up there. If it is possible, as much as it depends on you. Who has the burden of peacemaking? Who has the burden of restoration? It's the one sitting in your shoes. You have the burden of peacemaking. And let me tell you this, and I want to say it real slow. The pain of unresolved conflict is greater than the pain to fix it. Decide today. I have decided, so long as it depends on me, to be a peacemaker. Jesus even said, blessed are the peacemakers. Regardless of whether or not the other person responds in the same way and wants to make peace, I have decided to make peace. You know what? And here, let me tell you, many times they will not respond to make peace. But don't let someone else's possible reaction determine your healing action. Don't let someone's potential response determine your godly initiation. Because let me tell you this, godly actions precede godly feelings. Somebody say, well, I'm gonna restore that relationship just as soon as I get an unction to. Just as soon as I feel led to. Just as soon as it feels in my heart it's the right timing. No. Godly action will precede godly feelings. You won't feel godly to go out, lay yourself bare and say, I'm sorry, can we make this right? You're not ever going to feel the feeling to do that. That's a godly feeling. Because God blesses the proud. God blesses the humble. God disposes with the proud. God blesses the humble. So what would God have us do? Restore those relationships. Restore those hurting places. One of the most amazing pictures of a decision to restore a relationship is found in 1 Samuel chapter 24. I'll just recap the story for you. David's life King David, the psalmist, his life models again and again and again the willingness to take an offense and the ability to forgive. Before the cross, even before Jesus in the New Testament, David modeled this. And so in 1 Samuel 24, we see David, who has already been pronounced and anointed that he is going to be king of Israel. But there's a problem. Israel already has a king. His name is Saul. David already had the promise. He knew that this was the eventuality because the prophet had told him this. And yet, in his kindness of serving in Saul's court, marrying Saul's daughter, being in the family, he ended up on the wrong side of the law when it came to the king. David and his band of men are hiding out in a cave because Saul is hot in pursuit over David's life. He's going to find David and he's going to kill David because he can see that David is the heir apparent to the throne. And in this amazing story in 1 Samuel 24, I mean, this isn't even something Hollywood could make up. This is a great story. It says that King Saul is down in a valley and he's taking his troops in pursuit of David, and he finds the need to relieve himself. He had to go to the bathroom, okay? And the king doesn't just do that in front of the whole army. He went up into the hillside. He found himself a dark little cave. He stepped just on the inside of the cave. He took off his outer garment and he began relieving himself. What he did not realize was that David and his men were hunkered down, camped out, and hiding in that very same cave. Now, can you think about poetic justice? I mean, this is an amazing thing. David and his men are watching as Saul has just entered in, thinking surely the army's to follow, but there's no army that follows. It's just Saul. He takes off all of his armor. He lays it down, and he even lays down his robe. The robe was to signify authority. It was the blessing. It was the mantle of royalty. He laid it down. You could hear that David's men surely would have been saying, David, this is your opportunity. This is the prime time. God has delivered your enemy into your hand. It's time for you to be king. Everything we've been running from, we no longer have to be fugitives. This is the day. Here, David, mighty man of valor, go and kill the king and you can be king. Pretty tempting, huh? What would you have done? What would I have done? David had just a few seconds to make this decision. And you could think 1,000 things are running through his head. I don't have to live in a cave anymore. I can be in a palace. I don't have to be at the reproach of the people anymore. I don't have to be on the wrong side of the law. This could be my greatest day. This could be my day of victory. Surely the circumstances couldn't have worked out any different. God has delivered this man into my hand. What do I do? Instead of taking Saul's life, David cuts off the corner of his garment. Saul never even knows that David was there. He finishes his business. He puts on his garment. He goes back down into the valley. And this is what the Bible says, that David runs out with the corner of Saul's garment, which is his authority, in his hand. He yells out, Saul, my Lord and my King. And David bows down with the garment in his hand up on the cliff. And all of Saul's army is watching this as David humbled himself with the garment in his hand. And Saul looks down and sees that his garment was cut. Saul realized in that moment that David's mercy and his grace spared his very life. All of the men that both David led and Saul led witnessed this amazing act of grace. This was a defining decision in David's life. It was an opportunity that he was extending an olive branch to restore a broken relationship. He knew in his heart that he was going to be king. He just didn't know how the circumstance would turn out. Yet Saul refused every offer of restoring that relationship. What did Romans say? As much as it depends on you, seek peace. It didn't happen that day for Saul and David. David's life story goes on to be pretty amazing in the palace. He does become king. Saul's life goes on to be pretty tragic. The choice is ours. What are we going to do? Now, there's a little phrase in this text that says that David's heart convicted him, it smote him because he had cut off the corner of Saul's garment. All of us would think, well, that was a whole lot better than taking his life. But David recognized a very vital point. God had called Saul to be king for that season and that time. And he said, I should have not touched the Lord's anointed. If God has called you and positioned you and anointed you, there's not enough devils in this world that can cause you to be stopped from your potential, that can cause you to come down from the place of elevation and authority that God has placed you on. And when God gets ready to find you, he knows where you're at. You might be saying, yeah, but it's not turning out for me. It's not working out the way I thought. I should have been further than this in life by now. I don't know why I'm over here. God knows, and he knows where you are. Have you decided to be faithful today? Have you missed an instruction back there that God said, restore something that is broken? Now, I think we need to be careful because we get into some bad theology in the church. We take these same words, touch not mine anointed and do my prophets no harm. That's actually in the Psalms. But we take that to say that, the pastors should never be challenged on any decision that they make. They're the Lord's anointed. Pastors have used that verse for years to determine what color the bathroom is going to be painted. Well, by God, he told me that this is what I'm supposed to paint the bathroom. No, it doesn't. That's not what he's talking about. That's bad theology. Sure, you can ask questions, and sure, you can have opportunities to do that. I call that Texas theology. You know what Texas theology is? There's a point here, a point there, and a whole bunch of bull in between. And that's not what we're talking about. Touch not the anointed means that God has placed somebody in a position and in an opportunity for a season, and it's not forever. So as much as it depends upon you, make peace and live at peace with everyone. The third thing I think we need to do is we need to sever harmful relationships. Proverbs 13:20 says it like this: whoever walks with wise people will be wise, but whoever associates with fools will suffer like a fool. 2 Corinthians 6:14, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? You want to know where you're going in life? Look at the friends and the company that you keep. That's what it's saying. Are you yoked with people that challenge you and encourage you and speak life to you? Or are you yoked with people that all the time are sucking the life out of you? They're joy killers. They're always killing your joy. They're all the time keeping you tore up in your heart. You don't know whether you're on or off. You're up one day, you're down the next. It's like a roller coaster all the time. Every time you get around them, there's like this love-hate relationship. You love to be around them, but you always feel so much drained when you're away from them. Those are the kind of harmful, toxic relationships that you have to sometimes say, I love you, but I'm going to have to do it from over here. We're going to have to love you from a distance. Well, we've used this verse a lot, don't be unequally yoked with unbelievers, to make us think that somehow Christians should never have non-Christian affiliations, and that's not what the text is saying at all. If you're a believer in this place and you don't have any unbelieving friends, then shame on you. You need to have some friends that are not believers. How can you be salt and light to a world you're never even being exposed to? What it's talking about is, who are you intimately yoked with, fellowshipping in your life? Are they the kind of people who are speaking life to you? Because it's okay to have a couple friends here and there that you're still working on and that you're still witnessing to, as long as you've got about 7 or 8 friends over there that are speaking life to you, that are challenging you, you're being accountable to them. Is anybody getting anything out of this? You're all quiet in this Presbyterian church. I was just wondering. I don't know. Be a life giver. Be a grace giver. Be a forgiver. Be a great giver. Here's the thing about cutting off relationships. I firmly believe, because I am a product of it, that God changes lives. The power of the gospel changes people. So you may have to today say, I'm going to love you from over here, because it may be that God needs to change them. Or it could be God needs to change you. I said it. It could be that God needs to change you. Some of us need to go back to Sunday school. We got any Sunday school teachers in the house? Some of us need to go back to children's church. Got any children's church workers in the house? Because in children's church, they sing this little song, He's still working on me to make me what I ought to be. It took Him just a week to make the moon and the stars, the heaven and the earth, Jupiter and Mars. How loving and patient He must be, but He's still working on me. You know, some things just get embedded in the hard drive, and you just never get them out. Amen. He's still working on me. Somebody say that and point to yourself. He's still working on me. Just because you broke off a toxic relationship doesn't mean the other person's the one's got to do all the changing. It could be that God's changing you, and that's the power of gospel. That's the power of love, that God changes lives. I know because I am one. I once was blind, but now I see. I once was lost, but now I'm found. God's amazing grace has been shed upon me. And maybe you're here today and you are facing a decision that just looks insurmountable. Maybe you're facing a decision that's just too hard for you to fathom how that you could come to a good conclusion on this decision. Maybe you're facing a decision that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt you have to make the choice that you're about to make. But because of the fallout and because of the conflict that's associated with it, you just don't even want to follow through and make the decision. I want to encourage you today to trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge God, and He promises to direct your path. If you're able, I don't know if you are, but if you're able to put off that big decision for just the next 3 weeks, 21 days, I'm going to ask you to do it. I'm going to ask you to do something. Our deacons are going to be praying in this church. Our leadership's going to be praying for the next 21 days. We have determined this is going to be a 21-day prayer time. For 21 days, and give it to God. Maybe it has to do with a relationship. Maybe it has to do with employment. Maybe it's to do with an end-of-life decision. Maybe it's to do with something that you don't want to face. I'm going to ask you for 21 days to pray over that decision. Now, maybe you need to make it tomorrow. If that's the case, then you need to pray and put it before God and make the best decision you can. But if you can wait, I want you to bathe it in prayer and see what God does. See what God will do with a yielded heart, a surrendered life.